I want to talk about the future. How do we navigate the era of great intelligence? And in doing so, I'm going to speak about 4 intelligences. Biological intelligence that the biological world has. Humans have cultural intelligence. Computers have artificial intelligence. And each person has their own personal intelligence. So those are shown there in that diagram on the right. The personal intelligence should be in the middle of the green oval. But the important thing is that intelligence is a very complicated thing to define. And we all think we know what human intelligence is, but actually it's not just our genetic intelligence, it's also what we get from the culture around us, from talking, from friends, from books, from the internet, from our smartphone. These are all contributing to human intelligence. We have discussed a lot about AI in the last few years, but in some ways the greatest intelligence on Earth, in the universe maybe, is biological intelligence. Biological intelligence learns by evolution, but in learning by evolution, biology actually teaches us something quite unexpected. So biology is really smart. It is a better chemist than any chemist in the world. It is a better material scientist than any material scientist in the world. It can make hands that robots are not able to make. It can make brains that are very small, don't use up large amounts of energy, and are very clever. So how does biology get so smart? And the answer is by evolution. The evolutionary tree on the left starts very simple and gets more and more and more complicated. So you might think it's obvious that it gets more complicated, but it's not. We need to think what is special about life that led to things becoming more and more complicated. And if you actually look more carefully, at the bottom, we have very simple life. A single cell, and then everything else is complex life. And the difference between simple life and complex life is that basically that in complex life, there are male cells and female cells. There is sex. And these 2 cells come together to give children, or these 2 individuals come together to have children, and the children are not the best of the father and the best of the mother. They're a random half of the mother and a random half of the father. So nature has, in cells that are not bacteria, tried to maximize how different the children are from the parents, and also how different the children are from each other. So essentially, with time, these complicated cells called eukaryotes gave life all the meaning of life. Everything you can see in the living world, trees, fish, birds, people, animals, are all made of cells that have male and female. What you cannot see is the bacteria, and in bacteria, there is no sex. A bacteria that is very successful makes many copies of himself by cloning. That works fine if the future is like the present. But the future is never like the present. In fact, the future is truly unknown, no matter how we think that. So basically, life is like a good banker. It tries to be very diverse in its investments. It makes the members of a species very different from each other, so that they have most chance of surviving in a future that's unknown. So essentially, the secret of life is not survival of the fittest. It's survival of the most diverse. And this is obvious, it should be known everyone, but I know myself, it was about 10 years ago where I suddenly heard a lecture and realized this, and it's a very, very important principle. So basically, nature rewards creativity, and in biology, mixing male and female cells leads to diversity of life forms. So remember, diversity is good. What about cultural intelligence? There are many aspects to cultural intelligence. There are lectures, there are books, there are things you read on the internet. But an important form of cultural intelligence is meeting people who are impressive, for whatever reason. So great scientists are very important role models for science. And in my life, I was very lucky. In some ways, I was going to start off by saying that I am somebody who was almost born global, because I've lived in many countries, worked in many countries, studied in many countries, and I really believe very much in the globalness of mankind. These scientists that I met were amazing role models. I was born in 1947. I'm 78 years old. In the 60s, these scientists discovered the secret of life. And they were all scientists working in one laboratory in Cambridge, England. The first person I wanted to mention is hard to see there, Max Perutz. He was the leader of the laboratory. He was trying to work out how we could find the structure of molecules. He had working with him a man called Kendrew. All of these people have Nobel Prizes. He was the person to find the first structure of a molecule. And it's interesting, back in those days, very important scientific findings were published in the popular magazine Scientific American. That was translated to many languages, and you could buy it at the bookstore wherever you lived. I grew up in South Africa, far from any center of science in the world, but I am sure I saw this magazine showing me the structure of a protein on its cover. The reason was that it was the only magazine that published in color. So if you wanted to do something cool, that cover was a cover picture. And then thirdly, Francis Crick, who in many ways is the most famous scientist of them all. And what is very special about Crick, that when he was doing his great work on DNA, he was actually Max Perutz's PhD student. Max Perutz also helped Crick with his famous DNA paper. He helped it get published, but Perutz is not a co-author. Perutz realized back in the 60s that if you want to give young people independence and responsibility, you help them, but you don't take away anything from them. You let them be independent. And this is a very important thing, which I think somehow in this world, scientists have forgotten how to do. They take too much credit for the old people and not enough credit for the young people. But this is a very important principle. So basically, inspiration is contagious. Mentors help shape future scientists, and we need to let young people meet those who change the world. I'm sure this is also true in business, perhaps even more so. I know that the venture capital community near Stanford is very, very good in mentoring the next generation and then moving away. And this is what scientists also need to learn to do. So basically, these heroes of mine reveal the secrets of life. What is the secret of life? And the secret of life is actually quite surprising. If you read a science fiction book that said this is how life works, you would not believe it. So basically, life works a bit like a factory. It has information in the DNA, how you make things, the description of what you have to do, but it doesn't have machines to make things. It simply creates a chain, in this case, a chain of amino acids in a protein, and the chain spontaneously makes itself. So it's a little bit like you make the parts of a car, you shake the system, and the car makes itself. Nature has to do that because life comes from inside. It doesn't come from outside. So the protein molecule has some shape, three-dimensional shape. The shape allows it to fit something into it, like that. If this is food, it's good for the cell, and you have more of the DNA. Very simple method that is basically the basis of all life on Earth. A little bit more about these molecules. So DNA is just information. It's a very long line, like a line of text. Each of our chromosomes has something like 1,000 million letters of text. And altogether, we have something like 3 billion letters of text. And that is actually not so much. A big book, maybe an encyclopedia, would have something like that number of letters. But these are the letters that tell the system how to make a human being. So everything to make a human being is in a book maybe this thick. And that is in the colors shown there on the right. The strand of DNA has a code in it. Okay, so DNA is information. The world is shapes in 3 dimensions. How does nature get shapes from information? And the secret is protein. So protein is a long molecule. Nature is full of chains. And if you like, the beads in the chain of nature for the protein are more different from each other. The beads have shape, and they have shape because they're going to direct how the molecule should fold up in 3 dimensions. But protein is not long and thin. It becomes small and tight, and it's something that has a 3-dimensional structure. And that structure is exactly the same in every one of our bodies. And we have 25,000 different shapes like that, so it's like a huge Lego set with many different shapes. And each of the shapes are made by a piece of string folding up. So it's like you had string, and you threw it in the air, and it folded into a certain kind of knot. And then you had another string, you threw it in the air, and it folded into a knot. So this is nature's secret for manufacturing. You make strings of a certain ordering of the letters, and they automatically form structure. So proteins fold into a precise, unique, most stable shape, and protein interactions are the secret of life assembly. The forces of physics and chemistry make the proteins create the shapes of life. Another very, very important thing in cultural intelligence is not just the wisdom of the teachers, it's the creativity of young people. Young people are intrinsically creative. Young people don't know what they shouldn't know. And that's why it's so important to nurture and give a lot of support to young people. I was super lucky. When I was 20 years old, I started doing independent research, not really because I wanted to. I wanted to do my PhD, but they said they wouldn't take me. They said they would only take me if I went to Israel. So basically, there was a man, John Kendrew, who had a Nobel Prize. When I was 16, I saw his television program. I had not seen television before. I was very excited by television. I saw his program about how life works. I wanted to do science. Then I wanted to do a PhD with him, and he said, instead I must go to the Weizmann Institute in Israel to work with somebody for a year before I could do my PhD. I didn't understand, but he did understand, because he sent me to Israel, and there I actually did work that ended up getting me to Stockholm, getting me the Nobel Prize. So basically, when I was 21 or 22, I was actually doing the work that ended up being very special as a young person. We did other work on protein folding, on enzymes, not important, but basically youth drives discovery. And this is true, I think, in every single field. And great basic science is done by the very young, so we need to give brilliant minds independence early. And I don't think this is just in science, I think it is in many fields. And this is a problem because people are living longer and longer. I mean, here am I on the stage at 78 saying, I should be saying I shouldn't be talking, I should give someone else a chance to talk. But I think my only justification for talking is to say how important it is for young people to be given resources. So now artificial intelligence. And I have been using computers since 60 years. I started programming computers when I was 18, and that's 60 years ago. And all this time I was using computers to solve hard problems. I was using artificial intelligence. A calculator is artificial intelligence. It can multiply 2 numbers better than we can. But there was a new generation of artificial intelligence which hit the world with great surprise almost 3 years ago. So this was the large language models. It came from OpenAI, ChatGPT 3.5, and it was a complete game changer. So let's say a bit about this. Okay. So I have been using AI very extensively for doing many things. Every single day, I am sure I ask 100 questions to AI, whether it's, and now I started off using ChatGPT, but now I use 4 or 5 different AIs because they don't always give you the same answer. They don't always tell you the truth, but they help enormously. Translation is amazing. All my slides have been translated by AI, and I'm sure they have mistakes, but it is so easy. It's wonderful to understand old things, not just old philosophy, but old computer systems. People have forgotten what computers could do 50 years ago. AI can tell you how you can program them, how you can work with them. I think number 5 is the most important. It's very personal. It really relates to the last panel we heard: medical advice, legal advice, and psychological advice. If you want to give up, talk to AI. If you want to go ahead faster, talk to AI. AI is very good at giving advice because it is not human and it's not biased. If you want to ask advice and you ask your brother, the advice you will get will depend on what he thinks. And he might think differently for himself than what would be good for you. Okay, so the basic idea of intelligence is actually surprisingly similar and simple. Essentially, it goes back to biological intelligence. Nature invented nerve cells. And the nerve cell is actually included in AI in a very, very simple form. What the nerve cell does is shown there, I guess, on the right. Basically, it takes numbers in, the eyes, multiplies them by some weight, adds something to them, and sums up the answer. It's basically like matrix multiplication or multiplying matrices by vectors. It's a very, very simple operation. Take numbers in, give them each a weight, add something to them, and add them together. That is what one nerve cell does. But you connect them together, so the neurons are all connected to each other, and the nerve cells are what comes out of one nerve cell goes into the next artificial neuron. And here you see a picture of, I think, 24 3 times 8 cells connected together. Now, this nerve cell has everything connected to everything. But when the nerve cell learns, it makes some connections stronger and other connections disappear. So the learning is changing the network. So the network, when it's learnt, looks like this. And I don't know what this network does. I just made the picture. But this is now a network that has been trained. So the training is to change the weights of the edges. Okay. Now, this is just an example. The real success was when GPT came out in November 2022. It was already trained on something like 1 billion words, maybe 1 million books. It says, actually, 100 billion words. And this was in many languages. It wasn't just trained in English. It was trained essentially on the entire content of all the books it could find and all the work on the internet. It was also trained by humans who guided it, but the end result was to calculate 1 trillion, 1 billion times a billion numbers that were the W values and the B values. Very simple. Going back to that equation, what was the strength? If a certain input came in, how much would you multiply it by? What would you add to it? Very simple. Now, the amazing thing is that when ChatGPT came out, it was smarter than anything we had ever seen from computers. Immediately, you could ask it questions, and you got silly answers, but you got answers that had content, that were real. And I remember in December 2022, just being amazed, even at very simple things, and now it's become much, much better. So what was the thing? How was the training done? You put the books in, you got out intelligence. So the idea basically behind AI is very, very simple. Learning to predict the next word. In a book, you have a sentence. You have millions of sentences in all the books, billions of sentences, and you might take the first 5 words in a sentence, or the middle 5 words, or the middle 20 words, and say, what is the next word? Now, they were just simply trained to do that because you know the answer. You have the book there. Trained to do this as best as possible. And this gave the appearance of intelligence. If you had asked people 5 years ago, what is intelligence? You would get many complicated answers. And the answer really is that a large, large part of intelligence is guessing the next word. So, Why this is so important is that predicting the next word requires understanding meaning, modeling the world, reasoning and planning, and social and emotional inference. These are all things that actually involve a lot of intelligence. So this is why predicting the next word is such a good thing to do. Now, the company that was doing this, OpenAI, was not really, I think, trying to do this. It was trying to learn to translate very well. OpenAI was trying to do two things: to translate and also to listen to spoken speech and get text. It would be very easy if a computer could understand every word I'm saying to translate it. But normally when a computer listens to a person, it gets very mixed up. Before the new generation, we had things like Siri from Apple, Alexa from Amazon, and people would try to say, "Hey Siri, set me an alarm." And it would go all wrong. It wouldn't understand. And now you can speak really freely to certain AI agents. So as a result, AI gave us AI, but it also solved translation. And by solving a translation, I mean, given a text, we'll produce a pretty good version of the text that is understandable to somebody in a different language. I'm sure it is not as good as a really good human translator, but it doesn't cost anything. It happens in seconds. It's done for you. It also did transcription. So transcription is when somebody speaks any language. The computer listens to the language and writes down the language. It can go from speaking to text. Once you've done that, translation becomes very easy, because it's easy to go from text to text, and going from text to speech has been solved many years ago. So basically, with this thing, something you can talk to, it will understand you, it will think, and it will answer back in an intelligent way. So basically, AI has a lot of different kinds of intelligences. One thing that surprised me was a paper maybe 2 years ago from Shanghai that basically showed that ChatGPT-4 at the time had high emotional intelligence. It was more emotionally intelligent than 90% of the people that they asked. That was surprising. Another big surprise was this one. So AI is actually better than most humans at the diplomacy. Not real diplomacy, but a game called diplomacy. This is a game that was very popular 70, 60 years ago, where the game board is a map of Europe, and everyone gets certain parts. You might get half of England and a quarter of Italy and so on. And then when it's your turn, you go to another player, any other player, and say, let's do a swap. I will give you this, and you will give me that and that. I will give you northern France, and you will give me eastern Germany, for example. AI can beat any human being at that game, and it doesn't cheat. It doesn't take something from somebody and then attack them. It wins the game because it has better understanding of that game board than any human being. This is a remarkable thing. In fact, this paper came out before ChatGPT, in maybe a few weeks before, from Meta, Facebook. They wrote a program called Cicero. It's published in the journal Science. And this was, for me, remarkable, both because it was so good at playing a game. And in previous talks, we had a lot said about games, and I'm a great believer in games as well. But this was remarkable. Okay. So basically, I've done all these things, and I've had the slide. So basically, AI is good for everything. As I said, I use many different AI engines every day, and my advice to everyone is play with AI. And I say play because AI is a very, very complicated tool. It is the most complicated tool human beings have ever invented. And, tools, you need to know how to use them. I was thinking, if you have a hammer and a chisel, and you're Michelangelo, you can make beautiful sculptures. But you can also destroy things with the same tool. And maybe if you're a Chinese craftsman, you can make a beautiful bathroom floor with a hammer and chisel. I'm sure I could do very little with a hammer and chisel. AI is the same way. Each of us needs to find how to get AI to do what we want it to do. So AI has the answers. You need the questions. And I think the most important thing is to stay as curious as an 8-year-old, but be as wise as an 80-year-old. Now, it's easier for an 8-year-old to be curious, but very hard to be wise. And it's quite hard for an 80-year-old man to be curious. But this is the secret: curiosity. Just be interested in everything, because AI really does have many, many answers. Now, it's not quite so simple. It's also very important in any kind of work to take risks. Now, entrepreneurs, the whole business of being an entrepreneur is to take risks. But in science, people also take risks. You have to. A good scientist is wrong 90% of the time. But great scientists are wrong 99% of the time. They're wrong more. Why? Because a really great scientist works on a really, really difficult problem. And if you work on a problem where you're right all the time, you're working on too easy a problem. So it's very important to be given the freedom to take risk. No one should say, oh, you made a mistake, you're in trouble. They should say, you didn't make a mistake, you're in trouble because you aren't taking enough risk. So I just wanted to say a little bit about personal intelligence. Because I think, we are human beings. We're not machines. We don't live from electricity. We don't have somebody to maintain us. We're responsible for the most amazing machine that nature has ever invented. And we need to learn to look after our body and mind. And very briefly, food and drink, movement, resting, and just being peaceful. And I'm just going to focus on one of these: sleep. Sleep is really important because it makes each day a new start. And I worry, certainly, that many people try to work too hard, don't sleep, and then each day they become less and less efficient until they burn out. So I try really, really hard to sleep. And I manage on average to sleep more than 8 hours a night, always. But I do this by playing a game. If I go to bed at a certain time, let's say I go to bed at 11 p.m., until 8 p.m. I won't get up, I won't touch my phone, I won't put the light on, and I won't read a book. If I want to lie there not sleeping, that's okay. But basically, I try to fake sleep. And that seems to work pretty well, because in the morning I get up and I ask my watch, did I sleep? And it says, yeah, you slept pretty well. And I feel pretty good. Okay. So basically, we have these different intelligences in life, A, B, C, or CEIBS, or whatever order you like, with PI. We really need to embrace them all for an amazing life. But again, it's not so simple, because my hero, Max Perutz, said that in science, truth always wins. Now, that may be true of science, but it's not true of everything. And the reason it's true in science, if I say something, let's say I say, jumping off a building that is 100 meters high doesn't hurt you, anyone who tries it will see very quickly that they die. So you would learn very quickly that that is just a stupid thing to say, and it wouldn't matter if I had 10 Nobel Prizes, it's wrong, because the practice is what proves it. But the same thing is true in science. In science, nothing should be accepted as truth until it's proven through evidence. So you assume that everything is wrong until it's proven right. This applies to AI, to the internet. It's crucial to have healthy skepticism and verify all information before accepting it as fact. Thank you all for your attention.